we are going to turn to our downloadable notes. For those of you that haven't downloaded your notes or your exercise yet, please go to just below the video. There's a link to download today's exercise. I will say this up front, that exercises are not just for today. They are to go in a folder or a notebook where you're keeping all of your lessons together in one place. My suggestion is that when you put them in one place, before going on to the next course, there are things to do and things to review from the previous course. So keep them all in which place? One place. Thank you. Keep it special. There will be a lot of note-taking in terms of your personal participation. Some of those things are certainly private to you, so keep them in a private place where nobody else can disturb them. Are you with me? All right, thank you. So first, how to ditch an old habit and replace it with a new one. So I've shared some of my bad habits with you. What were they, please? Procrastination, mind frick, thank you. What else? Disorganization, jealousy, envy. Thank you. Rabbit chasing. Thank you. So the question is, and again, you can write directly on the sheets. These are for you. There's also room on the back. If you have the PDF, you can keep notes, or my suggestion is that you print them out because it's very tactile to write things. I prefer you do that than type them on a computer. You're more than welcome to do both, but I think writing is a very important way to do this. The first question is, which habit do you have that is not serving you well at the moment that you're finally willing to give up so that you can create a more empowering habit in its place? Let me explain it. Just before you answer this question, let me put it like this. How many of you have ever wanted a new fridge? You know, you just wake up one day and you look at your fridge and it makes a lot of noise, doesn't really cool things well, the freezer's kind of all got stuff stuck in it, and it doesn't really make ice, and it's white, and you've already modified you've renovated the kitchen, but the fridge just doesn't match anymore. How many of you ever had that thought? Now, if you haven't, then at least try to picture it, okay? How do most people go about replacing the fridge? They get in the car, or they go online, and they go out into the world, and they find what? A new fridge. And the reason why they rarely get around to that is because they come from what we call the it'll do mentality. We don't buy a new fridge because the old one, it'll do. I come from that family. That's the family I grew up with. We never had a new car because a used one, it'll do. We never went to restaurants because home-cooked meals, it'll do. I never had any of the finer things in life growing up because most of the things that we had, our mentality was, it'll do. And so we never get around to replacing the fridge because it'll do. What I've learned in life is that if you really want to get a new fridge, get rid of the old one first. Because as soon as you get rid of the old one, your motivation to fill that void in the universe, which is the empty space in your kitchen, will be much more powerful than the it'll do mentality. Does that make sense? Habits are like that. In order to create space for a new habit, you first must get rid of the old one. Now, we may not know how to do that yet, but what I'd like you to do is take a good solid 2 minutes. How long, please? 2 minutes. And I will put a timer up, and I really want you to think about it. If it's more than one habit, that's great. We'll come back in 2 minutes. Go. Can I get a couple of examples, please? Just shout them out. Yep. So one of the bad habits is we don't tackle our priorities. We don't organize our priorities, and we don't get to them. Thank you. What else? Yes?
Not sticking to my own schedule, letting other schedules compare with mine.
So not sticking to our own schedules. One more, please. Spending time on email when we should be doing other things. So many of us have these things. The second part of this is I want you to estimate how much time, if you ditched that habit, that you would save. Now, some of them you may not be able to measure it in time, but find out some way of expressing what you would save. And if it's not just time, I'd prefer time, but how much you would save if you actually were able to ditch that habit. 1 minute to think about that. Go. So everybody say this with me, please. And if you're online, you can type it or say it out loud. There's an equal and opposite to everything in the universe. Say that with me, please. There's an equal and an opposite to everything in the universe. In this universe that we live in, I'm sure you have enough common sense to know there's a north, there's a south, there's an east and a west, and a fast and a slow, and an up and a down, and every other opposite thing in terms of energy on planet Earth. Shiny and dull. Smart and intelligent and overwhelmed and underwhelmed. Thank you. Good. So there's an equal and opposite to everything. There's also an equal and opposite to every behavior, every negative behavior that you have. So if you consider it a bad habit, you're going to create a new learned behavior. So what empowering habit or behavior do you need to develop? When I work with companies, and I work with pretty significant ones, they're not all huge, but they all want to be huge. Okay? So if you consider that you would like to create a $20 million company one day, I've worked with $20 million companies. If you want to create a $50 million company, I've worked with $50 million companies. If you want to create a $500,000 company, I've also worked with those. I don't do so much of that anymore, but I used to. Does that make sense? Because my level of expertise didn't match those that wanted to create $10 million companies. Does that make sense? You can't help somebody do something if you've never experienced that before. Does that make sense? Okay. So in this particular situation, working together, I know that there is, what I do with companies is we do what we call strength to leverage. In other words, everybody says, well, what strengths are we missing? I don't look at it that way. I look at it as strength to leverage and develop and leverage. So there are habits or behaviors that we need to develop. And we haven't developed them yet. If we had developed them, we wouldn't have these negative behaviors. You following? So you may or may not know what that habit or behavior is, but let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say my negative habit is the concept of disorganization. What's the result of disorganization? Well, the result of disorganization is, right? You look at maybe our business hasn't grown because it's disorganized. Or I can't follow my own schedule because I don't have a schedule. I do things ad hoc when they come up. How many of you have ever had to put out a fire with your business? I had one client the other day, actually more of a colleague than a client. This particular colleague told me that he hates clients. I personally think hating your clients is a bad habit. And if you don't want to hate your clients, and they're not willing to, if the client isn't willing to change, say that please, then you can either do one of two things. You can empower the client more to change, but if they're not willing to change, you can only what? Fire them and walk away. And a lot of people think, well, I need the money. Needing money is a what? It's lack. Thank you. So my philosophy is if we get rid of someone, there's now a void in the universe which can be immediately filled. And this happened to me just the other day. I had an executive consulting client who wants to take a break. Particular reason for this one was cash flow. It's an $8.5 million company, and all of their money goes out at this time of year, and they need a 2-month break. The very same day, which day, please? The very same day, I got called into a meeting and created an executive consulting client to replace that one that I never anticipated. So the concept of things flowing to you easily and effortlessly is essentially this. When you create a void, no matter what, if you're open to it being filled, it will be filled. So the new habit, this is a very simple one, the habit that I had to create was how to become organized. And then you're saying to yourself, well, it's one thing to know that I need to organize, it's another thing to know what? How to organize. Fortunately, there is a course coming up in That's Ambitious, which is the absolute best method for organization that I've ever seen. Right now, we're just preparing for our journey. When information and implementation turns into results, at that point, we will need better organizational skills. Because when things start to move, people tend to become very overwhelmed. I had a conversation with one of the gentlemen who's online right now the other day. Feels like they're working harder than ever, yet their financial situation is remaining what? Relatively the same. I believe one of the challenges that this particular gentleman is experiencing, and I'm pretty sure you know who I'm talking about, there's just something you don't know yet about the concept of organization. Now, that may not be the only solution, but throughout the next year, I will provide as many step-by-step solutions to disorganization as I possibly can. Are y'all with me? Yes. Okay, it's very important that you understand there's an equal and opposite to every negative habit that you have. Please take 1 minute and write it down. What more empowering behavior do you need to develop? By the way, behavior is the measuring stick for how quickly your journey will unfold. Just because you know something and you know the steps in order to create that behavior, only your behavior, the result of knowing, and the implementation of the knowing, only your behavior will dictate your progress. Only your what will dictate your progress? Behavior. Thank you. It's how you behave that will create the measuring stick for how fast you get from where you are now to where you want to be. In between, we call that the gap. Say that, please. The gap. The distance between where we are now and where we want to be. And by the way, some of you are sitting there thinking, or on the other side of the screen thinking to yourself, I'm doing well. Say that, please. I'm doing well. Here's my response to that. No matter how well you're doing, it can always be better. No matter how well or content, and by the way, I think comfort and contentment is a disease. You need to push yourself as ambitious people. You need to find the intrinsic, healthy ambition motivator to move forward. And I'll tell you why. If you've only got enough for yourself and your family unit, you're not doing good enough. You are not affecting the world with your lack that things will run out. You are not helping enough people get to where they want to be. By the way, my philosophy, help enough people get what they want, you can have anything you want. And some of you say, well, I help people all the time. But if that's the way you say it, then there's a level of resentment. If you're forced to help, you resent it. But if you help willingly from the heart, that's the opposite of resentment. That's what, please? What's the opposite of resentment? Giving. Yeah, or giving, or kindness, or empathy, or concern, or caring. I love that word. Caring. I once had a lady from CTV National News. She was one of the writers and the person who decided what would go on CTV National News. And she told me whenever I wanted media, she said, why should we care? And I'll tell you why you should care about other people. Because if you don't, it's a sad, sad life. But if you care for others resentingly, because you're forced to, think of a family member that you've had to help because you had to help them. Did you resent it, or did you do it out of loving kindness and caring? Okay, everybody put your hands up like this, everybody even at home, and go, pause. Pause. Let's take time out for our mind sponsor. Our mind is sponsoring this event. Say that. You're engaged in the process. Your mind is committed. It's sponsoring this event. The problem with a sponsor is the sponsor's not always happy. You'll find ways to disagree. The mind will find ways to keep you safe. The mind will find ways to keep you where you are. It likes to be safe. So let's take a look at the 4 stages of creating the life that we want. I'm sure you have, at some point in your life experienced the first stage. In fact, many people, many of friends that I grew up with, many family members that I've known for years and years and years, are still in the same place they've always been. Because they are unconsciously incompetent. Say that with me, please. Thank you. What does that mean? It means they're not awake. And so all of the results that they create are done by default. Life just what? Happens to you. You are not an active participant in the deliberate creation process. I love that. That just sounds so good. You are not an active, awake participant in the deliberate creation process. It means you're unconscious, and everything that you create is incompetent because you haven't taken an active role. And one day, somebody shows up in your life. Could be me, could be another mentor, could be a friend, family member, or colleague. Somebody with some experience says, it doesn't have to be that way. Things can change. Your mind will immediately say, what? I know that. I've seen other people change. It happens by accident. People win the lottery. People win things all the time. I never win anything. What's that? It's a lack mentality. I never win anything. I used to say that to myself. I never win anything. Until I changed. I am in the process of attracting winning. What happened? I would start to win. By the way, you have to play in order to win. Let's play the game of life. So the concept of unconscious incompetence is where most people are at. And then when you wake up, you become what? Consciously what, please? Incompetent. Consciously incompetent means you're now awake and you realize that what you're creating in your life is not great. That's the beginning of change. The beginning of what, please? Change. Things cannot change until you're awake. For example, all of us came to planet Earth with sunglasses. Let's say that I was born with red sunglasses on and you were born with green sunglasses on. What sunglasses color is mine? What color is yours? Green. So one day we're standing on a street corner. I'm wearing red, you're wearing, and we're looking at some guy in a white shirt. And I say, isn't that a nice red shirt? And you argue with me immediately by saying what? He's not wearing a red shirt, he's wearing a green shirt. That's the way you see the world, because those were the colored sunglasses that you were born with. By the way, the colored sunglasses that you have on right now were created by what? No. It was created by your environment. In actual fact, from the ages of 0 to 7, we call that the imprint period. What period is it, please? Imprint. You were imprinted a belief system based on people you knew that were close to you, such as who, please? Mom and dad, teachers, television. Help me out here. You cannot build muscle watching me lift weight. Friends. So your environment created your belief system, which inherently created the color of your sunglasses. By the way, from the ages of 7 to 14, we call that the what period? It's called the, one second, where's my brain? It's called the modeling period. We become more aware as we grow up and we start to model people we admire. We model football stars and basketball stars and hockey stars and movie stars and our friends and our teachers and people that we admire and respect. We model ourselves after them, but mostly the people in our close circle of influence, the people that we hang out with. For example, many people still do this. You model your closest friends and colleagues because your financial situation is likely no more than $10,000 higher or lower than the majority of your friends. Those are the people that you hang out with. And I always say to people, if you want to get rich, find some new friends. Say that with me, please. Find some. I'll be your friend. I'm willing to be your friend. I'm friends to lots of people. So we go through this modeling period. Then we go through what's called a breakout period where it's you feel very stuck in your close circle of influence. You're trying to break out of it. So through your college days. By the way, the mind is not even fully formed until around the age of 21. It's not even fully aware and awake yet until 21, which is interesting. But the concept of consciously incompetent, you may be in that stage right now. Most people become aware usually by their 20s or 30s. Some people never do. Moving up the ladder, the only way we can start the process of being competent, is it spelled with an A or an E? E, thank you so much. We become consciously competent. How do we become consciously competent? The only way, say that please, the only way is if somebody comes along to the argument about what color shirt he's wearing and says, you're wearing sunglasses. Take them off. So the environment and the place that you're in was created by your closest circle, media, things that you're aware of. But somebody like me comes along and says, wait a second, take the sunglasses off. And then as soon as you take them off, that begins the process of becoming competent. I'm giving you direction, deliberate creation direction. And it's a great place to be. I love the consciously competent place. Because only until you're awake can you begin to change your results. Take the sunglasses off today, follow me, and follow this group, and participate with this group over the next coming months, and I promise you, I will do everything in my power without coming short of a blood transfusion. I may do that. I could do that. I'm O negative. I will do everything in my power to get you into the place of conscious competence. Only then can you really begin to fly and learn what life is really about. There is one final stage. And that final stage, I believe I'm somewhere between this stage and the final stage. I don't think you could ever, I've seen people who display behaviors of this. I've never, for a long time now, for several years now, I've never come across an individual personally. I've seen aspects of it, and sometimes we look at people online or on television. How many of you have ever seen that 8-year-old just sing like a god on America's Got Talent or something like that, right? I believe that is this level, and for most of us, that's an impossibility. I look at things like that and I say to myself, I'm inspired but I'm also daunted by the fact that I can't possibly have that level of talent. Does that make sense? I'm inspired yet daunted. Say that with me, please. I'm inspired yet. The concept of envy is like, gee, I wish I was just that what? That much more given talent or given the ability to create things unconsciously, which is our final step. And we call that unconscious unconscious competence. Say it, please. Unconscious competence. It's a great stage. I haven't met anybody for a while yet that seems to do that as well as I do. And believe me, people, I'm not saying this to impress you. I'm saying this to impress upon you that I believe I've reached a state of unconscious incompetence where one client leaves for whatever reason and it's immediately what, please? Immediately replaced. I believe that every void in the universe can be filled without a lot of extra effort, a lot of working hard. You with me? Okay. Hands up like this, and unpause.